Welcome to the Smart Business Revolution.
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 You want a revolution?
You say you want a revolution?
Revolution. The revolution.
It's going on right now.
Welcome to The Revolution, the Smart Business Revolution podcast, where we ask today's most successful entrepreneurs to share the tools and strategies they use to build relationships and connections to grow their revenue. Now, your host for The Revolution, John Corcoran.
All right, welcome everyone. John Corcoran here, the host of the Smart Business Revolution podcast, where I get the great privilege of talking with smart CEOs, founders, entrepreneurs of companies and organizations, really worldwide, including today talking to a friend over across the pond over in England. But I've talked to, CEOs and founders of YPO and EO and Activation Blizzard, and Lending Tree and OpenTable and so many different ones. I'm also the co-founder of Rise25, where we help connect B2B business owners to their ideal prospects. And today I've got with me Matthew Griffiths. Matthew is a Vistage chair. He's got a couple of really interesting things about him. So one, he's involved in a company called Games Without Frontiers. It's kind of like escape room for entrepreneurs. You can wrap your head around that. We're going to talk about what that is. He also was the head of the world's largest entertainment technology trade association. We're going to talk about that. After having been born into a theater family, he kind of was born into it, but eventually rose to head that association. He also survived a brain tumor and had to relearn nearly everything and also overcome the anger that he experienced from going through that. So we'll talk about that experience as well. But first, before we get into that, this episode is brought to you by Rise25 Media, which helps B2B businesses to get clients, referrals, and strategic partnerships through done-for-you podcasts and content marketing. You're listening to a podcast right now, and if you've ever thought about the idea of starting a podcast, I say yes, do it, and it's the best thing you'll ever do. One of the best things I've ever done in my life, and I get to meet and talk to smart people like Matthew here today. And Matthew, you've been involved in podcasting, so I'll just bring you into the conversation. What has podcasting been like for you? What is your take on doing a podcast?
Well, hi, John. Thanks very much for having me as well, and welcome to London. Podcasting, from my point of view, is great. Exactly as you just said, you get a chance to meet really clever, really interesting people, and if you can get it to a point where it just seems like it's a conversation between the two of you, and your guest is not worrying about who's listening, or the thousands of people, or in your case the millions of people listening to the podcast. It's great because you can really get into those in-depth conversations and just one-on-one, so you can start to draw stuff out of people. And the great thing about a podcast, where you can see someone, is you're reading the body language. So as long as you remember to be quiet, you let the guest talk. And I'm sorry, that's not going to be a note here for this, but you can get the best. You know what I mean about that. People have got so much to say. They've got what they want to say, and then what you're trying to draw out is what they probably didn't intend to say. But that's the interesting stuff.
Absolutely right. Exactly. That's the fun stuff, is teasing that out of people. And I should mention Turning Point Series is the name of the podcast from Vistage that you are involved in. So if you want to learn more about doing that, about doing your own podcast, go to rise25media.com or email us at support@rise25media.com. So Matthew, first, let's start with your background, how you got into entertainment technology. You were basically born into the industry. Both your parents were involved in the theater.
That's right. Almost as near to being born in the traveling circus. My father came out of the war, Second World War, having learned a skill in electronics, and got a job in the theatre. He started work in London's West End, in the Phoenix Theatre, and he met my mother, who had come out of art school where she'd studied costume design, and they met. She was a stage manager, he was an electrician. They got together. And very quickly, my mother realized that they probably needed to work separately. So she gravitated over to television, which at the time had just started to do live production of performing arts on television, or certainly on British television. And she had a very long career in TV, and she did news, current affairs, and she ended up doing children's TV, which she said was the most fun part of the whole life. He, on the other hand, started off as an electrician, as I say, then became group engineer and worked for the Stolmos theatre empire, which was one of the big theatre groups, or the biggest theatre group in London's West End, certainly in the 80s, 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000s. So they had about 13 of the West End theatres there. Any of your listeners that have been to London would have been in one of them. Things like the London Palladium, the Drury Lane Theatre, Her Majesty's, all the Shaftesbury Avenue theatres.
Wow.
And so growing up as a child, the only way I got to see my father was by going up and being with him on stage. And I kind of, that's how I ended up in the business, because that was initially my playground, and that's where I felt more comfortable.
Got it. And so at what point did you kind of rise into leadership? Because that's a big leap from running around behind stage, helping with lights and sound and stuff like that, to, getting really deeply involved and eventually leading the world's largest entertainment technology association.
Yeah, I was thinking about this, and I think it comes down to two things. It's about accountability and responsibility. And because I'm my father's son, as it were, you're always trying to come out from underneath his wing, if you will, and establish yourself. And to do that, you had to take control of certain things. You wanted to own a project, own something or other that you could do. And I was very lucky. I was surrounded by very good people who all encouraged. And anybody working in live performance will know that it's very good as an industry for sharing that sort of know-how around. So all the opportunities were there. I loved it so much. I just took everything that came my way. And then I was very lucky with a number of tours that came up, some clients that came up that took me all around the world. And then I learned while I was out and about and taking things on. And it was just something that came very naturally. I didn't think of it at the time as leadership. I just thought it as doing what I was meant to do and get it right. And, we worked to a deadline. The curtain goes up at a certain time every night, and you've got to be ready for it. And then it was only later when I joined the Vistage organization, looking back, I realized, just how much I'd gleaned over those early years, which had led me to help me when I did the trade body stuff, and then when we did some governmental stuff, and then subsequently what I do now, which is coaching business leaders.
Yeah. And, one of the things you did while head of Plaza was you were responsible for merger and acquisition of 3 trade associations into Plaza. So, a lot of the people that listen to this show are business leaders, and maybe they're thinking about acquiring other businesses. So what led to that? And talk a little bit about that experience of bringing and convincing these other trade associations to join under one umbrella, so to speak.
Yeah, I mean, where it starts, of course, is with a vision. So you need to be sharing the same vision with the people you're talking to, and you need to, in good old Simon Sinek ways, you need to understand why. Why are you doing it? Why is who's benefiting from the whole thing? Why would this work? And at the time, the colleagues I was working with, we appeared to share the same vision and what we wanted to get done. Bizarrely, everybody that came along with us on the journey, from the members that we represented and all the staff that worked with us, they got it. They understood it. Broadly, everybody got it, and they were right with it. Where it became problematic was right at the very top of the organisation, where those visions weren't quite aligned as we thought they should be, and that's where you get the slight fracture points, and that's where ultimately it can go wrong if you don't jump on that very quickly. So you need to share the same vision. You need to be in the right place at the right time. You need to be communicating, let people know what you're thinking, and then you just need to go for it. You need to go for it. At the time, as a UK trade body coming into the US market. That was kind of unheard of. But we did it, and both sides made it work.
And so then how do you fix that problem at the top with the other leaders at the top of the organization? Is it as simple as, I imagine it's not as simple as just get rid of a couple of people?
No. Well, no, because, I suppose that is a way you can do it. It leads to more problems further down the track. But I think equally with trade organizations, you're talking about taking the hearts and minds of the people that you represent with you as well. So, you're talking about tribal leaders here coming together in a coalition. And as we've seen in global politics, that's not necessarily an easy thing to do. So whilst everybody's benefiting, it works well. When it starts to get pressured, as ours did when the crash happened, the last crash happened.
Are you talking about 2001 or are you talking about 2008?
2008.
Okay.
2008, when things started to go awry, and of course the members that you're representing globally start to come under pressure, as does the organizations themselves. That's when you really are stress testing, pressure testing those relationships, that resolve, that trust. And yeah, in our case, finally it proved too much that the merger had to unmerge finally. But we had a good run. We had about 6 years of it working really, really well and very powerfully, and we were able to get into government and lobby for the industry. And here we are. I'm looking on now, looking at what's going on, and with this dreadful pandemic that we have, one of the industries that's suffering the most is
entertainment. Yeah, and I did want to ask you about that. If you were still in charge and you were advising your members, we're recording this in basically very end of May 2020, so the whole coronavirus pandemic is still unfolding. Right, live entertainment is completely shut down. So, and this relates also to the work that you do with Vistage, with your members that you have now. What are you advising people if you were still head of that organization? Also, what are you advising your Vistage members?
Well, the first thing you got to get away from the panic mode initially, which is, I don't know what's going on. I don't know how to deal with this. What are we going to do? So once you get through that element of it, you've then got to be very honest with yourself, and you've got to ask yourself the tough questions. As Jim Collins would say, you've got to be brutally honest with yourself. And have you got a business there that can go forward? Are you going to find different things that you can do? I mean, I'm aware, for instance, as an example, there's an engineering company, certainly based in the UK, that manufactures specific parts, engineering parts for stage entertainment. They're actually making the protective equipment for the health service now. They've had to pivot into that. Now, is that a long-term thing? No, it's not. Is it keeping them going through this period? Yes, it is. And they've got a number of staff that they're employed that are going to still be employed. They're going to keep people in their jobs while they're working out what this new world is going to look like. It looks like, certainly from an entertainment point of view, we're not going to get open in the next few months, certainly not the way it was. So you've got to find something that's going to work in that period of time. And you've got to take some tough decisions. The companies were running at with the number of people and the amount of resource they needed, they're not going to be that size anymore. So you've got to start looking at how you look after the staff that you're going to retain, but also how you do the best for the staff that you may have to let go, and how you can help them in the workplace and find a way forward for them. And
right.
That's really tough. There's a lot of business leaders haven't gone through that of that scale. And so a lot of the work I'm doing at the moment is allowing them to talk that through and start scenario planning. There are 3 or 4 myriad scenarios they've got to plan for, and it's just helping them talk that through. And that's, if I might say, that's where the Vistage model is very, very good. The real power is in getting those peer-to-peer conversations, really honest, truthful conversations that you wouldn't necessarily have with other board members, family members, stockholders, shareholders, whatever. You just have them with fellow CEOs where you can be brutally honest and say, just what are we going to do with this? And you'll get really good feedback.
Right. There's a great Visage chair who I know here in San Francisco, Carl Arnold, been doing it for a number of years. And he brought me in to speak at his group about podcasting recently and generating leads using podcasts. And he demonstrated really his commitment by just really going above and beyond as a Visage chair, just the care and calling his members, checking in on them, really like beyond the scope typically of a typical Visage chair. So it sounds like, for you from a functional standpoint, in terms of the role that you're playing now as the leader of your Visage groups, it's really about being there for them, being a sounding board, meeting them where they're at and helping guide them through what they're going through.
Yeah, and there's a very well-known Vistage chair here in the UK, a senior, let's call him a senior Vistage chair, Ivan Goldberg, and he always describes himself as having a safe pair of ears, and that's I love to go by that sort of thing, because sometimes you just need to talk it through. You just need to say it out loud to someone who's got no agenda other than they're trying to help you. So they're not going to try and dissuade you. They're not going to tell you that it's politically wrong or this, that, and the other. You just need to talk it through, talk it out, and have someone ask you tough questions back. And that's what Vistage chairs do. And you can only do that by being available at whenever they want to have those conversations, but also prompting them, having the one-to-ones with them and coaching them through. Because otherwise the danger is you become very siloed in A, in your thinking, and B, you just don't want to go out into the real world. It is frightening.
Right.
You shut yourself off too much.
Right. Let's talk about another project you're involved in, this Games Without Frontiers. Games Without Frontiers, I described it, I don't know if they describe it this way, but to me, it struck me as kind of like an escape room for entrepreneurs. So tell everyone what it is exactly. And of course, we're recording this and, the model, the way you've done it before, hopefully we'll come back sometime in the future. Right now, people are not doing in-person gatherings, but the idea is an in-person gathering of business owners and talk a little bit of how it works.
Yeah, well, and this is a great case example of what happens in the pandemic. So the original idea, as you very well described, set up by two guys called Stuart Lang and Tim Dew, based out in Edinburgh in Scotland. And they had this idea where you get, not necessarily business owners, a lot of them are business owners, but senior management team certainly, up to 13 people. You get them in a room. They may know each other. They may all be from the same company. They may be complete strangers to each other. And the essence is you don't tell them very much. They know they're going to come in and play a game. They know they're told they're going to be running a fictional company, but they're going to be running it for real. The management team's all been sacked. The business owner has brought this new cohort of people, 13 people in, and you very quickly assign them to one of 5 desks. There's a marketing desk, a sales desk, a production desk, a finance desk, and then there's a CEO desk. So you, depending on how many numbers you've got 2 or 3 people per desk. And on the desk, there's a laptop computer, which is hooked up to the software system. And then there's a little A5 booklet to the side of them, which gives them the briefest of instructions on how to run that specialism within that company. So marketing, sales, what have you. And you very quickly, me as the facilitator of the game, will run them through, right, well, John, you're going to be on the sales desk. Your job is you get a lead from marketing, you process it, and you hand it on to production. As soon as you've done that, made the sale, hit the bell, we pay you commission, which is in terms of little sweeties. It's a confectionery company, as it happens. And the system goes on. couldn't be simpler. And you give them the barest minimum, and then you say a minute in the game is a week in real life. So we're going to run this as 26 weeks, 6 months. So that's 26 minutes. And the game starts, and you hit a klaxon or a bell, and off you go. And of course, everybody's looking and just go, whoa, 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 whoa. You haven't told us how to do this, that, and the other. And you say, well, that's not what happens in real life. You know, when you get into a job, nobody comes up and tells you exactly everything. Find it out. It's your company. You write the rules. You don't like the rules, reinvent the rules.
So then does everyone they quickly read the booklet and talk to one another and overthrow the leader? What's it like?
It's really funny because different people will do different things. So most of them start reading the booklet and they go quiet. So now whilst this is happening, there's a big wide screen up on the wall, and that's giving you a rolling cash flow. They start with 160,000 sterling in this case, but it could be dollars in the account. And now, as a minute goes by, that's dropped on the trend line by I think it's 13,000. And then by the time they get the second minute, it's gone another 13. And they haven't done a sale yet at this point. Everyone's just reading the booklet.
Someone's probably freaking out.
But someone starts freaking out, and someone's saying, we better sell something here. So they kind of work out how to sell it and what to do. And of course, what they do, without giving too much of the game away, is everybody just goes mental. They just keep selling stuff and doing. No one's paying attention to the payment terms. No one's paying attention to cash or whatever. And I would say, in the number of times I've run this game, I would say broadly 95% of people manage to bankrupt the company within the first 26 minutes.
Oh, man.
Because they run out of cash. And what they're doing is they're overselling, in effect. So anyway, you do this. It is an intense experience. When you suddenly realize that you've only got 26 minutes, it is intense. But what you're also doing is you're pressure testing relationships, communication, thinking, that sort of thing. And then you stop and you say, well, how was that? You do a little bit of a wash up, and you go around the room and you look at the results. There's a whole bunch of reports that come up. And you very quickly, and what did we learn? Blah, blah, blah. Oh, yeah. So everybody talks about it. Then you have you allow the CEO then, the notional CEO, to run a virtual board meeting for 10 minutes, what they're going to fix, because they're now going to do another 26. They're going to do the next 6 months. I'll put some money into the company. I'm now going to be an investor.
Oh, so you're an investor. Okay, got it.
So
okay.
I'll put some more money into the account. Let's say another 200,000. Right, off we go. Bang, on 10 minutes.
So how do they do the second time then?
Well, this is where it gets really funny, because now they get the process kind of right, but they're not they're still very ineffective. And it's at this point you suddenly start to see the penny dropping, or the light going on in some of them as to what they could do better. And they start asking things like, well, can we change the way that we do it? It's your company. You do what you want. You don't have to follow, change it if you want. And so, of course, over 4 iterations of this, they get to do this 4 times. They finally work out about communication, not overselling. They work out how to work together. They work out that maybe working in little micro teams are better than working as one big unit. The CEO, who, by the way, at this point has just been sitting back watching this going on, suddenly realizes he's got to get involved, or she's got to get involved. And they start, either causing trouble or they actually proactively help. So by the end of the day, you do 2 sessions in the morning, you have a lunch time, you might switch the teams around. As an investor, I might insist the CEO changes his staffing around.
Oh, so you can do that. You can come in and make changes. Okay. Oh,
well,
cool.
I can say that if he wants any more money, he's got to make changes.
Oh, got it.
So, and it's a great way, apart from teaching people about the mechanics of the very basic mechanical elements of how a business runs. What you're also doing, you're seeing what certain characters are like in pressure situations. Invariably, it's the quieter ones that come through because they're watching and they're studying. Sometimes the louder ones are the ones that struggle with it. little bit because it's just not happening how they want it to happen.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And we found, and it's just absolutely worked brilliantly over here, and people love it, and a lot of organisations use it. However, the pandemic happened, COVID happened, and as you quite rightly pointed out, we now can't meet up in groups. So how on earth do Games Without Frontiers run this game? Quick answer, after having a moment of sheer panic, is they said, well, we do it as a remote working exercise. So they've now managed to develop a system where you can run this whole game for remote teams. And,
okay.
it focuses on going from sort of the start of it, where you're talking about being chaotic, and you're then running through being reactive and then being active, and it's trying to get you to the final bit, which has almost been like Zen-like, which is you're not just coping with this, you're now actually making this competitive advantage. And it's about having conversations that don't have to rely on everybody at the same time. You're talking about conversations that are happening at the same time in parallel with other conversations, and how people are able to take that initiative and do that and understand where they're trying to get to.
Well, it's such a cool idea. I hope that, it will spread and more people will be able to experience it. I hope I'll be able to experience it at some point soon, either in person or virtually. Now tell me, we talked previously about this. Tell me about some of the experiences you've had with groups going through this, because I know you said, for example, you've had some aspiring CEOs who weren't happy with the way that things shook out because it wasn't as profitable a business as they maybe had envisioned.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of the game, we're talking
yes,
about.
yeah.
So we very often what you'll try and do is when you bring people in, you make sure they don't go into the sort of discipline that they're already doing. So you wouldn't put an FD in the accounts or financial bit. In fact, you'll probably put them in marketing or something a bit out of it. Yeah. But when you're working with a client, very often they've got something in mind. And one particular client that comes to mind wanted to put in an aspiring CEO, someone they had earmarked to become the next, head honcho. And, but he was just a very dictatorial, directive kind of person. And they bankrupted in the first phase, and then they did it again in the second phase. So that's fine. No shakes there. And then we had lunch, and we had a word with him and just said, well, you may want to try do a little bit of this. And there's a part of the game where if you're being aware and whatever, you'll see it and you can work a way that it works for you. He missed this by a country mile. It just absolutely missed it. And the more he was missing it, the more he was getting really frustrated with the whole thing, which meant everybody was just disowning him and not going anywhere with it. It's the one time I've actually had to stop the game before the very end because he bankrupted it so many times.
Oh, man.
And he was incandescent with rage. It took him a long time to calm down and just, and people.
Well, I guess people can get competitive in any kind of game, right?
Yeah.
I mean, people can stalk off from a tennis match and refuse to continue doing it.
Yeah, and now there's some great learns. Whether he took the great learns, I'm not sure, but certainly the management team around him took some great learns from it, and just realised that if they're going to have him in that position, there's certain backups, there's certain things they're going to have to do to help.
Right.
But it was very funny how he really believed in the game, and he was so immersed in the whole thing.
Yeah.
But he kept just doing the same thing wrong, and as we all know, keep doing the same thing doesn't make it right. It just makes it wrong every time. So
I want to circle back. I want to circle back to we teased it in the beginning. You had a brain tumor. Talk a little bit about what that experience was like, going into it, having to relearn everything that you knew. Tell us what that experience was like, and also how it guided your decisions to do what you're doing now.
Yeah, well, it did, and John, it was probably a major, well, we talked about turning point. It was a major turning point in my life. It was just at the point we had sold, the company I was running had been sold into a bigger group of companies. And that hadn't been particularly stressful. I mean, any one of your listeners that's gone through a merger or an acquisition knows that they can be stressful, but this wasn't overly stressful. And it safeguarded, we managed to do it, which meant that everybody still had a job. So by and large, it was all very good. And I went off for a holiday. Funny enough, I came over to the States and had a holiday in the States with my partner at the time. And came back, and I started losing weight, feeling tired. Everybody put it down to the stress of the takeover and the sale of the company. Didn't think any more of it. And then finally, the chairman of the company of the group of companies that had bought our company, who turned out to has been a great mentor to me going forward, said, "Have you checked yourself out? Have you, And I said, "Oh, no, it's fine." And he said, "Look, do me a favor, go and see my GP, general practitioner, and get a second opinion." And I went to see this doctor, and he phoned a friend of his, and he said, "Right, go home, pack a bag. I need to see you at the hospital tomorrow." And I went to this hospital, and I ended up staying there for 6 months.
Wow.
And now, whether you can see, well, certainly those of you that are just listening to it, I'm a reasonably big guy, as in frame. I was I'm smaller than I was then, because I've been on the road doing a load of stuff, so I was quite beat up. But I went down, the lowest I got over that 6 months, I got down to about 10 and 3/4 stone.
I don't know what that is in pounds, but yeah.
That's 140, 150, 60 pounds, something like that.
Yeah.
And by that point, I'd lost my sight, and I'd lost part of my hearing, and I was bedridden, couldn't walk. And what had happened is, over that period of time, and this is a thing that I've learned about the medical profession, they don't just go to the thing they think it is, they just eliminate stuff. And it had taken 6 months to eliminate all this stuff. Everybody around me was freaking out. They just thought, "Oh my God, this is going."
So for how long did they not know it was a brain tumor then?
Not until once they realized what it might be, then they started looking at a certain area within the brain and realized that what they thought was something else actually was masking the tumor element of it. So it growing right on the pituitary gland.
So was it a month, 2 months that you didn't know what it was?
Oh no! So it was a good 4 months that they didn't know what it was.
Oh man, you're in the hospital for 4 months and you don't know what this is.
Yeah, without knowing what it was.
Wow.
But everybody could see me just wasting away.
Yeah.
I swear to, honestly, this is the truth. My whole priority in that time was what time the lady came round with the tea trolley. In the morning, and that's the only thing that concerned me. If she wasn't there at the two times, Mary, her name was. She was a very nice lady called Mary, and she used to bring around the tea trolley. And if Mary wasn't there at 9 in the morning and at 3:30 in the afternoon, I used to get upset.
And why? Why were you focused on that?
Because that became my new normal. That became my structure. That was what I was working with. The fact I couldn't see anything by this point, or couldn't even get out of bed, even if I wanted to go and get a big cup of tea.
Yeah.
Just meant that
it was the one thing you could depend on, you could focus on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, they suddenly find out what it is. At this point, I've got all the major brains in London seeing me and trying to work out what it was. I thankfully became a special case because that meant I got the best treatment. Anyway, they find out what it is. Great. Now what to do? Because now they've arrested the problem. Now I'm, in a wheelchair, and I'm, a shadow of what I was. I managed to get the eyesight back through steroids and stuff, but I've lost the hearing. What do we do now? And the thing was, well, you can either be in the wheelchair for the rest of your life, or we can try and coach you back into how to walk again. We need to teach you how to do this.
They get rid of the tumor, though?
They treated the tumor so it shrank down. They
Okay.
couldn't operate.
Got it. Okay. Okay.
So technically, yes. I suspect
Okay.
I'm here still. So
Yeah. Yeah.
let's assume they have.
Yes. Yes.
A happy ending.
But you have to learn how to walk again.
So I have to learn how to walk again, and I'm really angry, John. I didn't ask to be ill.
Yeah.
I didn't ask to be in a wheelchair. I certainly didn't ask to have all of this stuff around me, and I certainly didn't need, everybody having a go about, you need to be on drugs, what you're going to do, how you're going to live, all this sort of stuff. So I get taken to a rehab centre. My father was alive at the time, and he wheels me in the wheelchair. And at the front door of the centre, we're met by this, as it turned out, was a very lovely nurse, but she was quite a domineering lady when she met me at the front door. And she stopped. She put up her hand and just stopped both of us. And she said to my father, "You get back into the car and you go home, and we'll call you when we're ready for you to come and pick him up." And so he looked slightly taken aback and went to try and complain, and she just fixed him with a look and said, "No, go." Mm-hmm. And then she looked at me, and I was, as I said, I was angry. I didn't want to be here. And she said, "I'm right, and you're going to do everything that you're being told, and you will learn how to get up out of this wheelchair and you will walk again, but you've got to do what you're advised to do." So at that point, I nicknamed her Nurse Ratchet out of quickliness, because that's what she reminded me of. Mm-hmm. Anyway, we did the paperwork, and about an hour later, she said, "Okay, now you can go and meet the rest of the patients here in the sort of coffee communal area." And this is where the first lesson hit me. I get wheeled in, and there in this coffee refectory area is everybody else in wheelchairs. And literally within about a minute, 2 minutes, I forget that I'm in a wheelchair. Everybody looks normal to me. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So I have this real thing about people talking about disabled people. They're not disabled. They've got emotions. They feel. Everybody feels things. They see things. Depending on what but they do have disabilities. Some have more than one. So that's right. So they've got disability, but they're not disabled.
Yeah.
And so you start to realize you're learning these very powerful lessons. Everybody sees themselves as normal when everybody's in a wheelchair. Mm-hmm. And then you start to learn how to, when you're a baby, you learn this stuff without even thinking. And babies just get fed up with falling over. That's right. How they end up walking.
And was this how you learned to let go of the anger? How did you let go of the anger?
Yeah, well, you become so focused on doing the right thing. And then because you're surrounded with, peer-to-peer contact, everybody's the same as you. And everybody wants the same thing. We all want to walk again. We all want, we have people there that have suffered from strokes and from tumors and all sorts of stuff. So we all shared a camaraderie. Some of us were jokers in the unit. Some of us were good storytellers. Some of us, were good friends and all this sort of stuff. So you bond as a group, and you start to learn, and you learn to unlearn everything that you've learned up till now. And then you put your trust in people to relearn again. So you actually go into a swimming pool, because as an adult, you realize what it's like to fall over. It hurts. Mm-hmm. So what they do is they tend to put you into a swimming pool so that when you fall over, you don't hurt yourself. You're obviously in water, so you can't. And you get to learn how to walk again. And 3 months later, I walked out of that rehab unit.
Wow.
And I met Nurse Ratchet in the car park, hugs and kisses to everybody as I go out. And the last person I see is Nurse Ratchet. And I gave her a big hug, and, there's tears and all this sort of stuff. And I said, "Thank you so much. And, thank you for getting me to walk." And she said, "We didn't do anything. You did it." She said, "We just gave you the tools to do it." And that was the biggest powerful thing, Wow. Whatever you do, you're the one that's going to do it.
So then how did that influence what you decided to do with the rest of your life? Did that, influence your decision to do what you're doing today?
Yeah, so that in part. So I came out of that and thought, right, then nothing's going to stop me doing what I want to do now. So if I want to go for something, and there was a whole bunch of stuff going on in the background, which led me into taking on the CEO job at Plaza, which I subsequently did. And it was a UK-based trade body at the time. And then we broadened that to being EU-wide, and then we set up a publishing business in the US, and then that led on to the merger in the US. And just everything we tried, we just went for something more. We went for, we ended up lobbying in government. We ended up setting up qualification programs, training programs. 2012, London had the Olympics. A lot of the companies that we represented were fundamental to that opening ceremony, closing ceremony that was spectacular and went around the world. So we did an awful lot of stuff in a very short period of time. But over that period of time, it kind of took me away from what I really loved doing. It all became a bit too political. It all became a little bit too, dealing with these faceless bureaucrats, both sides of the water, to be fair. And I had a chance meeting with an old work colleague at a summer drinks thing. And he said, "Oh, yeah, it's great. You're set now till you retire." And that just horrified me. That anybody could look at me and think, "You're going to retire." And it got into my head, and 3 weeks later, I just thought, I'm not going to do this anymore. So I gave him my notice, 6 months notice, and then thought, what am I going to do next? And then a very good friend of mine introduced me to someone who happened to be within the Vistage community, not with a view to doing Vistage, but as a result that came out of that, he said, "I'll tell you what, you're going to be ideal to be a Vistage chair." And I've been in that community since 2016, loved absolutely every second of it. I mean, couldn't be happier with the people I work with, the people that support us, the members that we work with. Just happy as can be now.
That's great.
Because you're working with people that all want to learn. They're lifelong learners. They all want to scale up. They're all open to stuff. And that's just a really refreshing place to be.
That's great. And I'm sure that you are a vital resource for them going through these challenging times right now, and especially with the context of what you've been through before, knowing that, as bad as things are right now, you've been through tough times before. Well, Matthew, that was a great story. Thank you for sharing that. Really appreciate that. I want to wrap things up with the question I always ask, which is, let's pretend we're at an awards banquet, much like the Oscars or the Emmys, and you're receiving an award for lifetime achievement for everything that you've done up until this point. So what we want to know is, who do you thank? Who are the mentors? Who are the friends? Who are the business partners? Who are the peers who you would acknowledge in your remarks? Maybe Nurse Ratched, whoever you would acknowledge.
Yeah, no, Nurse Ratchet's got to be up there. Okay, I'll do it without the Gwyneth Paltrow tears as well. So, so the first people, as always, has got to be family, mother, father. My father was a great role model for me. Loved what he did. My mother as well. My mother was a working mum. She did it when it wasn't fashionable to be working. So both of them, and my brother. My brother's an animator, and they're great role models for me. So it has to start with them. It then goes on to, there's so many people in my life that that have been so good to me and charitable to me. The mentor I was talking about before, in fact, there's two of them, John Simpson from White Light Group, if we name check them, and Brian Raven from the White Light Group. Brian, I'm still very great mates with. He actually lives in London locally, so we meet up. So they're there. Loads of people along the way that have given me their time and their expertise. I've got a very close circle of true friends as opposed to acquaintances. And those true friends, by that I'm talking about a dozen people here. And they're the ones that will be absolutely brutally honest with you and ask you the right way. So I have to thank them because they keep me grounded along the road. And the biggest one that keeps me grounded is my wife, Catherine, who he's an absolute rock and is brilliant. And that's the whole reason we do this, and I do it, and she's really good at asking those tough questions. So that's part of that.
Great.
Nurse Ratchet is there along with the physio terrorists that got me work.
Yeah, I'm sure they're out there still doing good work. Well, This has been great. Matthew, where can people go to connect with you and learn more about you?
Probably the best place is either go to www.vistage.co.uk and search on my name. You can see my bio and me there as a chair. Or go to gwof.co.uk for the Games Without Frontiers website, and you'll see all about the game there. And then if you look for me on LinkedIn, MJA Griffiths on LinkedIn. Connect.
Great.
Please feel free. Connect. It'd be lovely to hear from everybody. And then through the Vistage site, you can also hear the Turning Point podcast.
Excellent. All right, great. Thanks so much, Matthew.
Thanks, John.
Thank you for listening to the Smart Business Revolution podcast with John Corcoran. Find out more at smartbusinessrevolution.com. And while you're there, sign up for our email list and join the revolution.
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 And be listening for the next episode of the Smart Business Revolution podcast.